Hello Internet. Today we'll be looking at one of the most interesting and important features of the Behringer Neutron, which is its patchbay. So what's a patchbay? A patchbay is a primitive form of a modulation matrix. With it, we can rearrange the modules of the synth and create modulation destinations and sources that aren't hardwired to the synth. So with that said, let's take a look at the patchbay. Patchbay of the Behringer Neutron is basically 24 outs, 32 ins. We're going to take a look at the outs first, then the ins. So we have oscillator 1, 2, and oscillator mix out. And this is really useful if you want to use the sonic characteristic of the 3340 VCOs, but filtering them out with something else than the Behringer Neutron's filter. For example, with an Axis virus or whatever. We have the filter 1 and filter 2 out, and this is really important to create some unique filter types. And this is actually one of the features that I really love about the Behringer Neutrons, the fact that it has two VCFs. I'm going to demonstrate that at the end of this video. We have an overdrive out. So for example, if you want to just use the overdrive circuit, it's there. We have to enter the signal in here. I'm going to talk about the ins later on, and we have the out. We have the VCA out, the main output, and I think this can come in handy in Eurorack situations. We have dedicated noise out. We have envelope 1, envelope 2 out. And actually this is really cool because when I use it with my Model D, I sometimes just use the envelopes because it's an ADSR, and on the Model D there's an ADR. Or ADS, depends on the switch. We have an invert out, and I think that the invert is actually a really interesting feature of the Neutron because, as the name suggests, it'll invert the signal. So for example, the second envelope will modulate the filter, and the problem is it'll modulate from low frequency to high frequency. But if I wanted to modulate from high frequency to low mid frequency, well, I have to use the invert. Let me demonstrate that. So we have square. And if I'll take the second envelope, put it in the invert, take the invert, put it in the frequency modulation. I'm going to talk about that in a bit. And now listen to this. Without the invert, with the invert, you got the idea. So we have an LFO out, and this out is bipolar. What it means is that the signal will be from -5 to +5, which means that the LFO will go from negative values to positive values. But if we just wanted to go only positive values, we have the LFO unipolar out. And if you wanted to go only negative values, well, you guessed it, we have the invert module that will do that for us. We have sample and hold out. We have the mult. The mult is really important because, as the name suggests, it will multiply a signal. So if we need to multiply, whatever signal, we have the mult module. We have a MIDI gate, which is, just a gate signal that send every time a MIDI note comes in. And this can really come in handy, for example, to re-trigger the LFO or re-trigger the sample and hold, even maybe syncing the sample and hold. Because, for example, I really have hard time syncing the Neutron to my DAW because the software that comes with it, I don't know why it doesn't detect it. So for example, in an ARP situation, every time a note hits from my ARP, a MIDI gate signal will be sent to the sample and hold, and it'll reset it every time. So I'm sure to have a random modulation. You got the idea, like some sort of a cheat to synchronize my sample and hold or the LFO, whatever. We have two attenuators. attenuator 1, attenuator 2 out. And the attenuators are basically, let's call them dry and wet knob. What they do basically is that the signal that comes in, the voltage will get attenuated. When they're on the hard left, 0 voltage, and when it's on the hard right, it's maximum. So basically dry and wet. I'll demonstrate that in a second. Next, we have the slew module. What the slew module does is, well, basically, it'll round up the corner, which means the sample and hold will send stepped random modulation. But what if we want it to be smooth and we don't have the glide pattern here? So we will use the slew module for that. So basically, it'll round up the modulation, and at the same time it'll do the glide effect on the notes. So for instance, and for the modulation, now let's take the sample and hold, put it on the frequency mode in here, listen to the effect. But if you want to smooth up this modulation and we don't have the glide option in here, I'll put it in the slew in, take the slew, put it in the frequency mod, and listen to this. You got the idea. Now we have the sum 1 and sum 2. Basically, as the name suggests, they will sum 2 signals together and 1 signal will come out. And the assign module. The assign module is a really interesting feature of this synth, because it'll basically, as the name suggests, we can assign it to 5 different outputs. And these outputs are oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 CV, velocity, aftertouch, and mod wheel. And this can really come in handy because, for example, if I want to modulate my filter with the velocity, well, I can do that. That's it for the outs. Let's take a look at the ins. For the ins, we have oscillator 1, oscillator 2, and both oscillators in, and these are basically pitch modulations. We have the invert in, I've just talked about that. We have shape 1, shape 2 ins, were basically just shape modulation for the oscillators, and this can really result in some really cool actually modulations. It really depends on the sound we're trying to make, but it can really add some randomness that's really cool. Pulse width 1, pulse width 2 modulation. And speaking of pulse width modulation, the pulse width modulation for the square and the tone mode are hardwired to the LFO via the second attenuator. So we can, here's a square. Oh, sorry. We have VCF in, frequency modulation. Basically, it's the filter's frequency modulation, and this is really cool because we can use whatever modulation source to modulate the filter. We're not limited to the LFO or the second envelope because actually the mod depth is hardwired to the LFO. So basically, we have resonance modulation, overdrive in, VCA CV. Now this is really cool if you want to use external envelopes or whatever to close and opens the VCA. Delay in and delay time. And this is really cool because actually the delay of the Neutron is really special and has this characteristics to it. It's really special. And if you want to use it for some artistic effects, we can use it separated from the whole synth. We have envelope 1, envelope 2 gates, which, if you want to trigger them from an external source, or maybe the LFO or the sample and hold, we can do that. Sample and hold in, sample and hold clock. The sample and hold in, the sample and hold, the way it works is basically there's a signal coming in and it'll take a little sample of this sounds that's coming in, and it's going to create a stepped random modulation out of that. In general, sample and hold is hardwired to the noise, not only the neutron, but if we don't want to use the noise, maybe the oscillators or something else, we can use that. Sample and hold clock, as the name suggests. LFO rate, LFO shape, LFO trigger. I was just talking about that. We can re-trigger the LFO with the MIDI gate, for example. The mult-in, I've just talked about that. Attenuator 1 in, attenuator 1 CV. And this is really cool. And too bad the attenuator 2 doesn't have an attenuator 2 CV, because, we can automate the part, with the attenuator 1 CV without actually having to move the part. Slew in, I've just talked about that. Someone's A, someone B, someone 2A, someone 2B. No, you got it, as the name suggests. I think that's pretty much it for a deep overview on the patch bay. Now let me show you some psychedelic patches idea on the Behringer Neutron using the patch bay. So the most obvious patch trick, is the VCF1 to VCA in, because we are bypassing the overdrive circuit, which I think it'll alter the sound too much, I'm going to show you how to make the agile lead that I've made for the virus, I think a couple of months ago or something, but on the Behringer Neutron. So to do that, I'm going to send, first of all, I'm going to set my oscillator to saw. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to send an ARP signal. I'm going to send an ARP signal, just a simple signal. And, I'm going to use the MIDI gate for the signal to trigger the sample and hold. And like this, I know it's synced, as I've already explained. I'm going to take my sample and hold out, and I'm going to put it in the frequency mode. I'm going to set my filter to bandpass, give it some resonance, and mod depth. And voila, the agile lead. Now, let me show you a simple FM patch on the Behringer Neutron. For this, I'm going to use sine. I'm going to set both oscillators on sine. I'm going to take the oscillator 1. I'm going to put it in the attenuator, because FM, we really don't want it to be like 100% modulation, else it's just noise. I'll take attenuator 2, I'll put it in the second oscillator. I'm going to set it on high pass up. I'm going to stop the ARP. I'm just going to sync both oscillators. That. Now listen to the magic. A simple FM patch. For sure, we can use other waves, but I just wanted to make it simple with some sine waves. For the next patch, I'm going to show you how to make some squashy sounds with the Behringer Neutron. So I'm going to use, only the second oscillator. For that, I'm going to put it on square, because I think that the best squashes come from square wave. I just need to tune it. Now, for this, I need both envelopes to modulate. Well, I need the first envelope to modulate the pitch of the oscillator. I need the second envelope to modulate the filter. But since I don't have a third envelope for the VCA, I'm going to trigger the VCA with the MIDI gate. So, just like that. See, now the envelope won't do anything. Now, I'll take, wait, let me see. I'll take the first envelope to the first attenuator to the second oscillator, and now we have this. Some hard bass. The second envelope will just modulate the filter. I'm going to put it on bandpass. And here's our simple squelch. This is the end of this video. I'm going to make more videos about the use of the patchbay in psychedelic sound designs, but that's going to be for another video. For now, this is the end. Hope you've liked it. Have a great day.